Not too long ago, in the mysterious land of Toronto, Canada, Scott Pilgrim one by one had to take on the 7 evil exes in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Released in 2010, this visually eye-popping coming-of-age comedy saw Michael Cera star as Scott Pilgrim, a 22-year-old slacker who falls in love with the mysterious Ramona, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. But as they start dating, he must take on the wrath of her exes, who are out to destroy him out of envious revenge. Pilgrim must partake in video game-style battles with the exes in order to defeat them so he can win Ramona's love, while also avoiding his obsessed ex, Knives Chow, as well as pursuing a career with his garage band Sex Bomb. In this oddball, action-packed movie like no other. To be honest, I don't even know what Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is. Is it a video game movie? Or is it a comic book superhero movie? Or is it an indie punk rock film? Or is it an oddball coming-of-age comedy? Or heck, even a retro pop culture movie? Who knows, maybe it's all the above. So today we are going to explore the strange and unique world of Scott Pilgrim by looking into 10 things that you didn't know about Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Let's check it out. Number 10. The origins of Scott Pilgrim. Before the movie, Scott Pilgrim was a popular series of graphic novels, printed in black and white in digest size. Scott Pilgrim was the creation of Canadian author and artist Brian Lee O'Malley, and he came up with the idea of the Scott Pilgrim character after listening to a Canadian indie rock band Plumtree's song, which was also called Scott Pilgrim. Yep, Scott Pilgrim was named after a song. Another inspiration was the manga comic series Ranma. O'Malley wanted to write his own manga comic, despite the fact that at that time manga comics hadn't really broken through in North America yet, which is where the main market was. In 2004, the first Scott Pilgrim graphic novel was published, which was called Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, which was preceded with Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness, Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together, Scott Pilgrim vs. the Universe, and finally Scott Pilgrim's Finest Hour. The basic story of the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels is the same as the movie, as it focuses on an aimless 22-year-old Scott Pilgrim, who starts dating Knives Chow, but then becomes obsessed with the mysterious Ramona, where he must take on her exes in video game-style battles. The graphic novels became a huge hit, winning many awards and accolades, as well as a huge fan following. And as with all great comic book and novel medias, it was only a matter of time till a movie would ensue. Number 9. Scott Pilgrim's creator didn't want a movie adaptation. Omni Press, who published the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels, were keen to get the ball rolling for a movie after the publication of the first Scott Pilgrim graphic novel. However, Scott Pilgrim's creator, Brian Lee O'Malley, wasn't keen on his creation being made into a movie, as he thought that it would be a dumb action comedy movie starring an actor he didn't like as Scott Pilgrim, but admitted that he went along with it as at that time he was a poor, struggling artist and needed money. The project was taken to producer Mark Platt, who had produced several movies including the Legally Blonde films and Honey, with the movie being financed by his production company Mark Platt Films and British film and television company Big Talk Films. Then Universal Pictures came on board to be the movie's distributor. But the production now had to find a director to craft Scott Pilgrim vs. the World onto the big screen. Number 8. Shaun of the Dead led to Scott Pilgrim's director. 2004 saw the release of British film and TV director Edgar Wright's classic zombie-filled horror comedy Shaun of the Dead. The producers of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World were so impressed with Shaun of the Dead, they offered Wright the job to direct Scott Pilgrim. Wright was given a copy of the first Scott Pilgrim graphic novel while he was on tour promoting Shaun of the Dead, and Wright was instantly drawn to the world of Scott Pilgrim, finding it to be fresh and unique. Wright said that when it came to directing the movie, he took inspiration from the 1968 Italian movie Danger Diabolik. However, before directing could commence, work on the script was taking place, and during that time, Edgar Wright would go on to direct his next big film, the police comedy Hot Fuzz, which was also a big hit, and thus cementing Edgar Wright's credentials as a director even further. Number 7. Improvised ending. In 2005, actor turned screenwriter Michael Bacall was hired to write the script for the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World movie. He would get help from Edgar Wright and Scott Pilgrim's creator Brian Lee O'Malley. In fact, some of the lines of dialogue which didn't make it into the final film would go on to be used in later issues of the Scott Pilgrim graphic novels. And yeah, about that. At the time the script was being written, the last 2 Scott Pilgrim graphic novels had yet to be published, and thus it wasn't known yet how the story would end. So an ending had to be improvised for the film. There were several proposed endings, and one of these endings would see a twist reveal that Scott Pilgrim is a serial killer, and that the video game graphics in the fights were in his head, and thus although he thought he was having a comic book / video game battle with the X's, in reality he was just flat out murdering people. Which would have been a pretty grim ending. Another ending would see the character Gideon, Ramona's most powerful evil ex, turning into a giant transformer robot, which actually would have been pretty cool, but hey, I'm actually pretty happy with the ending that we actually got. Incidentally, the second draft of the script was submitted at midnight, on the day a writer's strike was to commence. Wow, talk about getting it in there just in time. Number 6. Scott Pilgrim could have had a different face. During the casting process, director Edgar Wright knew that he wanted Michael Cera for the role of Scott Pilgrim after watching him in the TV series Arrested Development. And Cera was happy to star in the movie as he was a huge fan of Wright. However, Universal Pictures had other plans. They originally wanted Seth Rogen to be cast as Scott Pilgrim, as he had previously starred in the Universal movie Knocked Up, which was a huge hit. However, when Wright cast Cera, Universal were okay with the decision, as Cera had previously starred in Superbad and Juno, which were big hits at the time. Wright also chose Mary Elizabeth Winstead to star as Ramona after seeing her in Death Proof. Several cast members then had to go through 2 months of martial arts training for the fight scenes in the movie, and even Jackie Chan's stunt team were used for the training. While training, Michael Cera claims that he got kicked in the throat, but then further said that it was okay as he didn't get hurt. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World also has a huge cast of co-stars. Now, often when I talk about movies, people get annoyed and sometimes even angry if I don't mention every actor associated with the movie. But there are just so many stars in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, way too many to list. Besides, the video's called 10 Things You Didn't Know, and we all know all the stars in the movie, so there, I spared you some information you already knew. Let's move on. Number 5. Scott Pilgrim could have been less Canadian. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is set in Toronto, Canada, and Toronto actually plays an important part to the story of Scott Pilgrim. It's to Pilgrim what Metropolis is to Superman, or what Gotham is to Batman. However, Universal Pictures wanted to change the location up a bit, and for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World to be filmed in New York instead. Yep, Scott Pilgrim let loose in the city that doesn't sleep. However, Edgar Wright was against the idea, and sticking with filming in Toronto. He felt that it was important to film in the Canadian city, in order to recapture the world from the graphic novels. Before filming began, Wright moved to Toronto and had lived there for a year in order to get a feel of the place. And so Scott Pilgrim got to stay in his native location, and didn't end up going to the Big Apple. There's something very Canadian about Scott Pilgrim, and to me that gives the movie a certain charm. Number 4. Quentin Tarantino gave some creative input. The movie starts off with an 8-bit version of the Universal logo, which was designed by Edgar Wright's brother, Oscar Wright, who is a storyboard artist. The sequence helps set up the old school video game feel of the movie. The movie then starts off by showing banter between Pilgrim and his fellow band members of Sex Bomb, where we then get a real grunge looking title sequence, which incorporates drawn on film animation effects. Originally, this isn't how the film started. There was no title sequence. Originally, we see a long shot of the band performing, and then the title Scott Pilgrim vs. the World pops up on the screen, and that's it. On with the movie. However, after Quentin Tarantino was shown a screening of the movie, he told Edgar Wright that the movie needs a title sequence to let people settle in and give them a feel of what they were in for, which led to the creation of the funky titles seen in the final cut. Now that I've mentioned it, these titles actually do look kind of Tarantino-ish. It has that sort of old school grindhouse look that he often goes for. But regardless, if the director of Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction tells you to put a title sequence in your movie, then I guess you put a title sequence in your movie. Simples. Number 3. Video game. So to coincide with the movie's release, a Scott Pilgrim vs. the World video game also came out. And despite being a tie-in with the movie, the design of the game is very much based on the art style of the graphic novels. The game is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, where players can either play as Scott, Ramona, Kim Pine, or Steven Stills, along with other characters that you can unlock like Knives, where you play through 7 levels and have to defeat all 7 of Ramona's evil exes. Players can also collect coins, which can be used to purchase items like increased health. The game is fun and colourful and vibrant and got plenty of good reviews for its time, particularly for its gameplay and soundtrack, and it was nominated for Best Downloadable Game by GameSpot and Game Trailers. And look at that, what do you know, the Shining Carpet makes a cameo in the game. I swear the Shining Carpet turns up everywhere these days. Since 2014 though, the game was delisted from PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade, and both Edgar Wright and Scott Pilgrim's creator O'Malley have reached out for the game to be brought back to coincide with the movie's 10th anniversary. Yeah, that's right, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is now 10 years old! Where does the time go? And well, what do you know, shortly after making this episode I just found out that the Scott Pilgrim video game is indeed making a comeback. That's awesome. Number 2, the final scene had to be reshot. So as mentioned, when the movie of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was being written, an ending had to be improvised, on the account that the last 2 issues of the graphic novel had yet to be published. So an ending was filmed where Scott decides to leave Ramona to be with Knives instead. But Scott Pilgrim's creator O'Malley objected to this ending, feeling that it would, quote, dilute the character of Knives. That, and by the time the movie was set to be released, the final Scott Pilgrim graphic novel was published, which ends with Scott and Ramona being together. And it was feared that if the movie has one ending and the graphic novel has a different ending, then it may cause a divide with the fans. So just 3 months before the film was set to be released, the new ending was filmed, which sees Scott reuniting with Ramona. Director Edgar Wright was worried about calling Knives actress Ellen Wand back for filming, fearing that she may be hurt by the new ending, but she was actually okay with the change. And Wright also said that he preferred this ending. However, something I've noticed over the years is a fair bit of backlash by fans who say that Scott should have chosen Knives over Ramona, and that Knives was in fact the better character and was a lot more nicer to Scott than Ramona was. So what do you guys think? Should the movie have ended with Scott being with Knives, or was having the character stay with Ramona the better ending? Number 1, Scott Pilgrim vs. the disappointing box office. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was released in August 2010 and was a total box office disaster, only bringing in just over $48 million on an $85 million budget. The film got mixed to positive reviews, with the visual style of the movie being praised, while some of the acting was considered poor. One critic who did really enjoy it was British film critic Mark Kermode, who likened it to Howard the Duck, but said that that's a good thing as he's a fan of Howard the Duck, in the sense that both Scott Pilgrim and Howard the Duck have comic book roots, they both perform poorly at the box office, and both have potential to be cult movies. I think Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was very much a young person's movie aimed at the youth of its time, and nothing quite like it had been seen before, so I'm guessing some people didn't quite know what to make of it. It has since become a film with a huge fan base as well as being a highly praised movie. So why do I think its release didn't work? Well, going by my own personal experience, there wasn't much marketing surrounding the movie. I was only made aware of it when it hit DVD. And although the graphic novels were popular, maybe there weren't many filmgoers who were aware of Scott Pilgrim. However, the movie has since made Scott Pilgrim a widespread pop cultural icon. What with its unique visual style, witty dialogue, and intriguing characters, to me Scott Pilgrim isn't just a movie for movie's sake, it's more of a weird, eccentric experience. And what an awesome experience it is. There are a string of movies that when they came out were flops, but in time would become hugely popular movies. including films like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Movies that push the boundaries of the norm and create something cinematically different and unique. And to me, Scott Pilgrim vs. The World fits into that category. What I love most about this movie is that it's just a good time. And I think that's the best way to sum it up. It's a good time. Anyway, I'm Minty, and you know Scott Pilgrim's story of Pac-Man originally being called Puck-Man but had to be changed out of fear that the machines would be graffitied with the word Puck turning into the F word? Yeah, that's actually true, that happened. There you go. There's fact 11 for you. See ya!